Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'da, habibti fillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As'al Allah kareem Rabbil arshil azim an yatawallana fi dunya wal akhirah. Habibti fillah, question was asked, how can I get rid of pornography in my life? Now, I've answered this question many times, but this is a recurring question, maybe from different people, I'm sure, because we do have to realize that pornography, in the state in which it is an absolutely new phenomenon in the way that it reaches all aspects of the world community. And so, with that being the case, it presents a much greater threat than it ever has in history. So probably from the concept of being pictures and photographs, it may have existed perhaps, over 100 years, okay? And probably even silent films that produced that type of material as well. But now, the access to this evil, every single man, woman, and child, and that's what is a horrendous travesty, can get access to it. So how do we deal with that? We all are aware that we can get it. It's so easy. Whether you're in school, whether you're outside of school, whether you're in the church, whether you're in the masjid, in the back of the masjid, whether you're watching the khutbah, but you're also watching TikTok and watching something evil and sinister directly in the masjid. Whether you're talking about Islam and someone sends you a link during the live stream trying to corrupt the people. It exists, it is reprehensible, but it is in mass production and it is a devastation to society, to the world community. So how do you deal with that when that is affecting your life? Well, first and foremost, one of the things that's critical for the Muslim is to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as he or she can. Now, we know that that's easier said than done, that you want to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You hate this type of activity, and at the same time you love this type of activity. And this is the dichotomy, this is the problem, is because there is a love as far as the desires, as far as your whims, as far as your inclinations. You like to look at those things. You like that. That is in accordance to a greater or lesser extent, we can argue this, with your nature. Your nature is to cohabitate, to be with the opposite sex. But Islam has a beautiful way of doing it, and that is through marriage. But however, those attacks from our shahwat, that even if it's something that could have been reprehensible to you before, the more you look, the more you indulge, the more you engage, the more you see, hear, and become a part of that wicked community, because it's a worldwide community, that it changes you. It changes you mentally, it changes you spiritually, it changes you physically, and it is devastating for the world. And we're only beginning to know some of the challenges of how it affects our brains and how it affects the way we interact with one another. Because the person who doses themselves with this type of sickness day in, day out, or day and night, or night and day, or whatever, that this puts a stamp on your heart, and it makes it very difficult to see the opposite sex in a healthy way. You can't look at anyone hardly if you are affected and infected with this in a healthy way. You will be looking, because you are bombarding yourself with this new type of reality. It becomes a new type of reality. And this is so destructive for the believer, because not only does it distort and can it affect marriages, and it affects communities and so forth. As we recently had an event, unfortunately, that was exposed, where a particular da'i, a person who calls and was a Quran reciter and this and that and the other, that he was capitalizing and abusing his relationship through that same means, through a grave evil and a grave misabuse and misuse of trust. So you can see the evil implications that it has so much. It spreads sicknesses in a variety of ways. How do we deal with that as a believer? How do we combat and challenge this grave evil and travesty which has become the norm that the children everywhere have access to so easy? You can't even stop it in reality. So the Muslim mahabbati fillah that wants to leave these kind of this world, this reality, that they need to, first and foremost, as one of our scholars mentioned, put a barrier between them and these types of activities. And one of those barriers could be, especially with AI and all the technology now, there are ways to limit what you're able to see from videos and pictures. But that takes also self-restraint to even go there. Also, it is very important to make true tawbah to Allah. And then that's where you'll put those other barriers up. So true tawbah and repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means that you stop the sin. So stop watching pornography and accessing it. You are determined not to return to watching that stuff, because the thing is, with that level of wickedness, what it does is it produces, maybe a person begins by looking at certain pictures and images. It only evolves. The next thing you know, they will either be, maybe they're doing their own now, or they're watching people that are live, because now it's not like in the past. Like I said, that whole industry, that whole evil has evolved. So it's very important to stop it and be determined not to return. You have to have a true determination that in your heart, you're like, I'm not going to do this. Even if you fail down the line, your repentance will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if the conditions were there. Meaning you stopped it. You were truly determined to leave it, meaning you erased all your websites, your access to them. You really were making real steps. Maybe you became more religious. You started going to more lectures. You start doing this. You start doing this. You start putting good in your life. And maybe you get married, or you deal with it. Maybe you go to counseling if it's that bad. Whatever the case may be, you do those things. You're making a true determination and taking true steps to leave the evil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept that repentance. And lastly, as repentance with regards to this type of sin, is that you feel sorrow. So the person who involves himself or herself in this kind of activity, then they should feel sorrow in their heart for what they're doing. And as I said, those other conditions, so they feel sorrow, they stop doing the sin, and they're determined not to return to the sin. All of those three conditions are a part of repentance, as Imam An-Nawawi, rahmatullahi alayhi, rahmatun wasi'ah, he mentions so articulately in his book, Riyadh al-Salihin. Lastly, ahabatu fillah, the struggle in dealing with that type of sin is something which is probably ongoing for many people, that it takes them a lot of time. There are those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored and they've been successful, and they've put those practices and watching that kind of material behind them. But the level of destruction, as I mentioned prior, is only beginning to be seen. That this type of sin is so devastating for households and communities that it causes a breakdown physically in people, their mental and their spiritual well-being. And it is devastating for communities and households. And when you do such a sin like this, it only means that you're going to begin to act. It's very difficult to say that someone watches pornography, maybe in a beginning stage. Then their next stage perhaps will be trying to, akramakumullah, self-induce pleasure. The next level is that they just plain and simple do fornication or adultery and things like this. And this is just a way of what is natural with this sin. That's how devastating it is. Then perhaps some people move on to other unique evil, to where they now begin to look at, akramakumullah, the same gender. They begin to look at creatures. They begin to look at every kind of evil. There are whole genres based on pure evil that goes beyond the nature of men, going on to the nature of creatures, of devastated evil devils, that you can only describe the kind of predators that prey on, I hate to say it, but on children and others. This is when a human being has lost a huge part of humanity. When they go to this kind of depravity, they've lost a huge part of their humanity. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil, protect us and our communities from this evil and wicked sin, and help us all to cure ourselves in our households and protect ourselves from any and all forms of evil. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.